This conversation begins in the book of Deuteronomy. Yes, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 8. Now, while you're turning to Deuteronomy, let me just kind of set the stage for what this message is going to entail, if you will. How many of you have ever been set up? Yeah, think about it. It's been a long time, I'm quite sure, but how many of you have ever been set up? Now, it doesn't have to be a date. It could be anything. Set up, at a job or set up with a promotion. But how many of you have ever been set up? I've never been set up before, but I set my wife up before she was my wife. When I was in college, my classmate was dating her cousin. And so I asked her, do you mind seeing if Gracie would like to come down and meet me? And so she said, well, sure. And she didn't say it like that, but she says yes. And so before I knew it, Gracie had come down and we were talking and kind of fellowshipping, if you will. And it's amazing. It's the first time I've set someone up and it's worked out for a lifetime. She became my wife. So some setups are good. As a matter of fact, some setups are great. When you find the love of your life because you asked about, you inquired about, just think about if I would have never asked about her. Then we would have been miles apart. Who knows what would have happened? But God knew. And so God set the whole stage for a cousin to be there and for me to ask the question, do you mind bringing your cousin Gracie down to meet me? Setups. Let's talk about what setups are all about. In the book of Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 8, it reads like this, and this is Moses talking to us. Behold, I have set the land before you. That word set means position. I have placed. Now this is God sharing this with Moses, so understand who's talking, okay? Behold, that stops traffic. That statement right there alone should stop all traffic. Behold, I have set the land before you. He's talking to the Israelites, the children of Israel. He's telling them, I have set the land before you. Watch this. Go in and possess the land which the Lord swore unto your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give unto them and to their seed after them. God says, I've made a promise and I'm keeping my promise. I'm showing you the land. He says, behold, I have set, watch this, I have set the land before you. Go in. He says, now go in though. Go in. I'm not going to just give it to you. Go in and possess it. Well, that tells me someone's already there. Like, Lord, you didn't bring us to a empty house. You didn't bring us to a place where we just can walk right in and put our feet up. No. God said, no. It don't work that way. God said, I promised your fathers I was going to give you something, but I didn't tell them how I was going to give it to you. And you're going to take it. It's going to be yours, but you're going to work for it. You're going to sweat for it. We have too many people that's been set up for success. But because they have to sweat for it, they quit. If I would have quit and wouldn't have asked my wife's cousin to bring her down, we never would have been together, more than likely. But I didn't quit. Samson, as an example, was set up by Delilah. That's a setup. Esau was set up by his mother and his brother, by his mother Rebekah and his brother Jacob. That's a setup. Eve was set up by Satan, by the devil himself. Job was set up, watch this, by the Lord. Have you tried my servant Job? He was set up. Jesus was set up by Judas, the betrayer. So when you look at it, we all have some experience in being set up or just being set. And that's this message. Behold, I have set the land before you. David was set up to become king. You see where I'm going? Samuel was set up, watch this, to replace Eli as the high priest. There are so many ways to set someone up. Company is coming over, especially for the holidays. You start setting your dining table. You start setting your house in order. You start cleaning up. When you set that dining table, you got the forks in the right place, you got the spoon, you got the knife, you got the coffee cup, you got the tea cup. You got those nice big old bowls that you're going to serve everybody out of. You start setting things up. You start setting things in order for your family and friends so that they can feast and have a great old time. What has God set up for you? What steps have He promised you? You know what He promised Israel, but what has He promised you? The title of this message is Game, Set, and Match. Game, set, and match. Let me ask you, are you even in the game of life? Because it's going to cost you something. I pray that you're in the game of life. I pray you're not just sitting on the sidelines complaining like the children of Israel were in the wilderness, reminiscing over what could have been. I pray that that's not you. So when you hear the term game, set, and match, it's a reference to the game of tennis. And it's broken down into matches, which are won by a number of sets, which are composed of games. So saying game, set, and match is a short way of declaring that you've won, that you are the ultimate winner. I won the game, which means I won the set, which means I won the match. Are you winning the game in life? Are you winning your set? Are you winning the match? The word game. The game is full of choices, life changing choices. The game of life. The word set. The Lord position set you up with opportunities. The problem with you is that you don't like the place that you're at. You don't like the hand that you've been dealt. But God has placed you, He's positioned you, He's set you up right where you are with opportunities. Now, it's up to you to take care of your business with that opportunity. And then the word match. What you do with those opportunities is totally up to you. That's the beautiful part about this. Yeah, match. What you do with the opportunities that God has set you up for, what He's placed you, how He's positioned you, it's all up to you. It's in your hands. You see, sometimes all we get in life is an opportunity. So the story of this message picks up with Moses leading the children of Israel out of slavery and across the Red Sea. This is a journey through the wilderness. And because they allowed, watch this, they allowed their hearts, their minds to continue to complain and to continue to look back. Watch this. God helped them back. God helped them back. They forfeited the promised land. Are you forfeiting your blessings? They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. We know the story. They wandered for 40 years. But it just wasn't in the wilderness where they wandered. They wandered inside of their minds for 40 years. It's a terrible thing to fight inside your mind. It's a terrible thing. They had to fight inward because there was a fight outward as well. This wasn't an easy journey. But they forfeited the promised land. But God still had them to fight. Watch this, watch this. So instead of a 1 year, if you will, journey across the wilderness, they added 39 more years of battle scars, of wounds, because there were other enemies in the wilderness. In your wilderness of life, oh no, it's just not a place where you go for isolation. There are other things, there are other demons, there are devils, yeah, there are witches in your wilderness. That's why God wanted to get them in and out. But no. They complained and murmured. God didn't want that kind of spirit coming over into the promised land. Would you? I mean, come on. Why would you want that from over there to come over here? But God used their misfortune, watch this, for their children. And God told them, 20 and under of all the children, that's who will make it into the promised land. You forfeited, but they're going to reap the rewards from it. So they were fighting off enemies in the wilderness. So guess what was happening? Their children were being battle tested. They were getting the experience from and the wisdom from all of the older people who were complaining and were negative. But they were learning how to fight the enemy. They were learning how to have strategy and how to have unity when they needed to. So when they set foot in the promised land, guess what? They knew how to take care of business. You see, God will take what the enemy, what the devil meant for evil, and God will turn it and work it out for your good. Our focus for this message, though, is found in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 8. Behold, I have placed the land before you. Go in and possess the land, which the Lord swore unto your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give unto them and their seed after them. How many of you can say that you're going into your promised land? How many of you can say that you're possessing the promises of God? Okay, everybody raising their hand. I can see it right now. How many of you can honestly say that you're truly possessing the land that God has before you? You see, you have to go into the land in order to possess it. It's one thing to be taken up to the front door, to the edge It's another thing to go in and possess it. You see, God had a group of people who murmured and complained and went through the wilderness but couldn't go into the promised land. Or you one of them. Or you one of those people, as I would say it. You know, the teacher asks you a question in class and you don't know the answer. But because all of the kids raise their hand, you raise your hand too, even though you don't know the answer. Quit being that type of individual. If you don't know, you don't know. But don't join the crowd. No, 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 no. That's how Israel got in trouble. Everyone's complaining. One person's complaining, guess what? It's contagious. Everyone started complaining. That's a time when you isolate yourself. That's a time when you divide yourself. You separate yourself. No, 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 no. Well, no, this is my group. No, no, that ain't your group. That's that group. Your group is over here on the Lord's side. Stop raising your hand and start truly possessing the promises that's spoken over your life. Let me share something with you. You can't walk into your promise and possess it if you can't walk out of your wilderness of depression, of doubt, of defeat, of complaining, of punishing yourself, of hate, of stubbornness, of rebelliousness, of witchcraft. You can't establish yourself as a great parent if you won't set aside your selfishness. That's some setting you have to do. You can't have a great marriage if you won't watch this, set to rest your singleness state of mind. You won't have a great marriage, not being single. You can't possess, watch this, salvation if you won't believe and confess that Jesus is Lord. You won't get it. You won't receive it. Your flesh, your lust, has to be crucified daily if you want to possess all that God has for you. You've got to kill that stuff daily. You've got to suppress that stuff daily. You can't possess unconditional love if you set conditions on your love. Your negative attitude that you refuse to leave in Egypt will hinder your blessings in the promised land or from getting into the promised land. Let me say it again. Your negative attitude, yes, I'm just moody in the morning. Your negative attitude that you refuse, watch this, to leave in Egypt will hinder your blessings. Evil will possess you and run you if you don't set it, if you don't, watch this, check it, if you don't reject it and defeat it in your life. It will run you. Evil will. God has set His grace, His mercy before us. You got to fight in your wilderness. There's some fighting in your wilderness. There's some fighting in the promised land. It never stops because God wants to keep you on your knees. Paul says it best. Paul says, if God didn't put this thorn in my flesh, I would be conceited. I'd be full of myself. So God has to put something, yes, He has to put something to anchor us, to keep us tethered to Him, or we'd sail away. You see, the children of Israel, if they could have only woke up and realized that they weren't in it for a fight because they had God on their side, but they were fighting themselves. That's a tough fight. It's one thing to fight the enemy, yes, physically, but when you're fighting yourself mentally, that's a tough fight. But God was on their side. They had victory, but they were too tied up. They were too bound to Egypt. I pray that you're not bound to Egypt. I pray that you're not bound to your old boyfriend. I pray that you're not bound to that job that you have. I pray you're not bound to your children. The Bible says leave and cleave. It tells you to cleave to your husband. Your children will forever leave you. You and your husband should be cleaving to each other. I pray you're not bound to that bottle of liquor. I pray you're not bound to that bottle of pills. I pray that you have the strength to understand. You can't possess your blessings if you continue to hold on to your messing. God's not going to bless that. Listen to me. God set Israel, His people. He set them up to go into the promised land, to take the spoils of the land. But what He didn't want was for Israel to go into the land and take the spoils and become spoiled by the spoils that they took in the land. That's not what He wanted. So God had them to fight for the land. He had them to go in and possess it, to take ownership. You see, when you fight for something, you take ownership of it. Even though He had promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, yes, I'm going to make your name a great name, and I'm going to make of you a great people, a great nation. God says, still, I need you to put some sweat into it. I need you to put your back into it. What has God set you up to possess? But your mouth has delayed your blessing. This tongue that you have in your mouth, This little member, oh, it's deadly. It will put you in bondage. Yeah, you carry that stuff and complaining about it, but you're carrying it and you're complaining about it. Who are you? Don't carry it in the wilderness. No, no, no. Leave it. Because if you carry it, it's going to try to ride you. Some things you have to shake off. Yeah, shake it off like the dust on your feet. Don't bring it to, I'll drop it once I get over it. No, 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 no. It's rode you too long. You're not going to break it. It's breaking you. Drop that stuff. Yes, drop it before you get to the wilderness. And if you can slay it in the wilderness, please slay it. But don't carry it. No, 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 no. Don't carry it, bury it. That stuff, yes. God has set you up to possess the promised land. Why would you bring that mess over with you? Why would you wander with that stuff inside of you? Let me ask you this question as I'm closing. What time have you set? Yes. What time have you set on your schedule, your personal schedule, that's pleasing to God? Because you're possessing that time for you and Him. If you set time for Him, watch this, He'll set your steps in order. He'll order your ways all the way to eternity in Him. That's the kind of setting I want. I want someone to set me up with Jesus Christ. That's the only setup I really need. I pray you don't forget Romans 10 and 9. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God has raised Him from the dead. Now, that's the setup every believer, every unbeliever needs right now. Don't forget, God is God.